In the 1980s, more and more people in the United States reported seeing unexplained objects and lights in the sky. At the same time, investigators who believed in UFOs revealed that they had discovered top-secret government documents that stated that alien craft had visited Earth. The documents had been hidden for 20 years, and they seemed to prove that there had been a giant cover-up. But actually, the reality was even stranger. The American government might have been making it all up, that they had created a fake conspiracy to deliberately mislead the population. The lights that people imagined were UFOs may in reality have been new high-technology weapons that the US government were testing. The government had developed the weapons because they, in turn, imagined that the Soviet Union was far stronger than it was, and still wanted to conquer the world. The government wanted to keep the weapons secret, but they couldn't always hide their appearance in the skies. So it is alleged that they chose a number of people to use to spread the rumour that these were really alien visitations. One of those chosen was called Paul Benovitz, who lived outside a giant airbase in New Mexico and had noticed strange things going on.
Years later, I sat down with Paul at dinner and told Paul exactly that everything we did was a sanctioned counterintelligence operation to convince him that what he was seeing was UFOs, and that what we didn't want him to know was that he tapped into something on the base, and we didn't want him to ever disclose that. We kind of planted the seed in Paul that what he was seeing and what he was hearing and what he was collecting was, in fact, probably maybe UFOs.
Benovitz and others chosen by the agency were, it is alleged, given a series of forged documents. Many of them were top-secret memos by the military describing sightings of unidentified aerial vehicles. The documents spread like wildfire, and they formed the basis for the wave of belief in UFOs that would spread through America in the 1990s.
It's the Michael Brooks Show. Welcome. We're broadcasting live from Brooklyn, New York, where left is best, with super producer Matt Leck.
Yo.
Head theoretician David Grisham.
How are y'all doing?
Nice. And super producer David Slavic. He's off-site, roaming the digitosphere, the Discord community of Michael Brooks patrons, Twitter, and everywhere else. On this week's program, we are, of course, back live and ready for the next wave of the fight against neoliberals, neo-fascists, everybody else. Everybody in the way of the left is best agenda. This is the anti-open and free exchange of ideas zone. On this week's program, Corey Pein, Michael Brooks Show crew, writer. We're talking about a recent UFO conference that he just attended, a new piece in The Baffler on why computer programming is a fake science and why it threatens to kill us all, plus more teases for his new book. It's almost about to hit you. Pre-order it now. Live, work, 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 die, a journey into the savage heart of Silicon Valley. Then we got to throw a failing institution into the pyramid. And then Trevor Beaulieu, Ricky Rawls, co-host of Champagne Sharks. He's here. We're talking about the Black Panther movie, the left, so much more. And we also got some found audio from Nation of Islam Obama's podcast on his feelings about the Black Panther film as well. We're going to play those for Trevor. All that. And then, of course, the post game for patrons on this week's Michael Brooks Show. Thanks, everybody. As always, the word is spreading, and I appreciate all of you. Let's start with why Jeremy Corbyn is very close to being the UK's next prime minister. A prime minister committed to an actual left agenda, a prime minister committed to reversing the global order of exploitation and abuses across the global south, someone committed to reversing austerity and neoliberalism and preserving the safety net and expanding it in the UK and addressing the inequality crisis and corporate governance crisis globally. And he did something over the weekend. He gave a speech on Brexit, which was very smart and very shrewd. He basically called for a soft Brexit, essentially, and said that the UK should remain inside the customs union, inside the Eurozone, which both undercuts the Tories because they've been committed under Theresa May to actually not stay inside the customs union, which is a very radical position and an appeasement of the sort of far-right position on Brexit. And also, another byproduct of Brexit is that it undermines and threatens the Good Friday Agreement, which brought a uneasy and not thorough, but nonetheless actual peace to Northern Ireland. And part of that deal involves open borders and freedom of movement inside Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland, which is, of course, still inside the United Kingdom. And the EU open borders policy helps allow the viability of that agreement to stand. The Brexiteers threaten that because that border would be reclosed in a hard Brexit. Corbyn addressed that as well. Ultimately, we need to destroy the euro as a currency. It's very reactionary in its design and antithetical to left policy. But a hard Brexit is obviously harmful to the UK, and the strategy that the Tories want coming out of it is to lower labor standards and turn the UK into some type of European financial haven like Singapore with even greater inequality. So Corbyn picked a shrewd positioning there, and all signs point to serious momentum for Jeremy Corbyn and Labour. And how do we know this as well? We know this because the smear merchants of the far-right Tory media in the UK are freaking out, and government ministers in Theresa May's government are using every tool and tactic imaginable to smear, distort, lie about, conspiracy theorize, and generally freak out about Jeremy Corbyn as premier. And inside the last couple of weeks in the UK, there has been a conspiracy theory that the right-wing tabloid press and the Theresa May government has ran with, that Jeremy Corbyn was a paid spy for the Czech government in the 1980s, the communist government of the Czech Republic in the 1980s. This has been thoroughly debunked. He met with a Czech ambassador and along with many other European and American politicians at the time. In fact, we have a brief clip of Jeremy Corbyn explaining the meeting, which we'll play for a second. But the far-right press has been running with this, and we're going to play Corbyn's explanation of it. And then we have an incredible piece of footage from the UK dealing with the fallout of this tabloid smear. But first, here is Jeremy Corbyn explaining his meetings with the Czech diplomat in the 1980s.
Well, I met him, as did a number of other people. He was the diplomat working in the Czech embassy, and his job was to talk about peace and détente. This was a time that Gorbachev was president of the USSR. There was a real chance of détente developing, of more peace within Europe. We spoke about those matters, and I told him what I thought, and he bizarrely discovered that I was opposed to Margaret Thatcher and the Tory government. I think it should not have been a surprise to him. But I had no knowledge of what Margaret Thatcher ever ate for breakfast. She never told me.
Any regrets about meeting him?
Not at all. I met him, as did many, many other members of Parliament. I also met a lot of American diplomats during that period. I went to the US Embassy to talk to them about what I thought was their wholly wrong strategy in Central America. If you're a serious member of Parliament and serious about international affairs, you meet people. You don't agree with most of them, but you have to meet them to understand what their position is and try and put forward your own view on peace, justice and human rights. I don't regret any of it.
Okay, we've got to wind up.
Why should I?
This former Czech spy who claims that Jeremy Corbyn worked for him said that he told her what Margaret Thatcher ate for breakfast, which would be truly unimaginable that a far-left MP in Tory UK, in Tory Britain in the 1980s, would know what Margaret Thatcher had for breakfast. This is an amazing piece of footage here, which really shows that both the lengths of which the Tory establishment is going to smear Corbyn, but also the extent to which they're starting to own gold themselves. And this is a UK program. Matt, what's the name of this presenter and program?
Andrew Neil. I have to look up the name of the show.
This is Andrew Neil, and I believe this is Question Time. But he has on a Tory MP guest and a spokesperson for the Labour Party, and he is going to tear in to this Tory about the tabloid coverage of the Czech spying fake story.
The Defence Secretary says Mr. Corbyn has, quote, betrayed his country. In what way?
Well, the Defence Secretary's chosen his own words. I mean, the point for me about this debacle
is that we believe... his country?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, is a grave danger to this country, but that's because
has he betrayed the country?
That's because of the ideas in which he believes and what that would mean for our economy and our society.
People have all sorts of ideas. But your Defence Secretary, our Defence Secretary, the Defence Secretary of this government, of our government, has said the leader of Her Majesty's opposition has betrayed his country. In what way has he betrayed his country?
Well, that really is a question for Gavin Williamson. That's not the word.
So you don't agree with it?
Well, I'm not really commenting on the...
Well, do you think he's betrayed the country?
I think that Jeremy Corbyn is a grave danger to our country.
But that's a political point. That's a different... Of course you do. Everybody in one party thinks the other party is a grave danger. Betrayal is an entirely different matter. That's a serious accusation. I just point out that a senior figure in the Czech Republic Defense Ministry says Sarkozy, who is the former Czech spy, it's his real name, is a liar. That's the exact word. The director of the Czech archives on security says no files show Mr. Corbyn cooperating with Czech intelligence. The German archivists say there are no Stasi files on Mr. Corbyn at all. So I ask again, in what sense has Mr. Corbyn betrayed this country?
Well, Andrew, I'm not going to comment on that. As you've suggested, this is an area where there's lots of questions to answer. Well, we've got a free press in this country. The free press is asking the questions. They should be answered.
Yeah, but it's not just the free press. Your fellow Tories are all piling in as a result. Your security minister, again, the key word security minister, he's compared Mr. Corbyn to Kim Philby. Kim Philby was a traitor. At the time, if he'd been found guilty, he would have been hanged. That's an outrageous smear to say of the leader of the opposition.
Well, Andrew, I'm not going to allow you to draw me into potentially libelling anybody, and so I'm not going to comment on that.
So you don't agree with that either? So you don't agree with the Defence Minister, you don't agree with the Security Minister?
But this is classic dead cat strategy, isn't it? The government's on the ropes on a whole range of issues, from NHS crisis, children's services are in crisis.
I've got the government on the ropes, and you've just interrupted.
The domestic agenda.
Let me try and keep them on the ropes. A Tory backbencher, MP, Ben Bradley, he tweeted that Mr. Corbyn had, quote, sold British secrets to communist spies. Sold British secrets to communist spies. So clearly without evidence that he then had to delete it.
Well, that really is a matter for Ben. But what I would say to you is that we believe in a free press in this country. The questions have been asked. The questions need to be answered.
I'm asking, do you think that Mr. Corbyn can be compared to Kim Philby? Do you think that he has in any way betrayed this country? Do you think he sold British secrets? Do you think any of that?
I've got no evidence for any of that, and so I won't make any...
So why do your colleagues?
Well, that's a matter for them, Andrew.
Surely the real scandal, Mr. Baker, isn't what Mr. Corbyn has supposedly done or not done. It's the outright lies and disinformation that your fellow Tories are spreading. That's the real scandal, isn't it?
I'm not going to accuse my colleagues of lies or disinformation. They will need to defend what they've said.
Well, I would put it to you, it's clearly a lie on any evidence so far available to us that Mr. Corbyn sold British secrets to the communists. Agreed?
I've got no evidence to make a judgment.
So to
either
claim
way.
so would be a lie.
Well, the question's been asked, the question should be answered, but it's not for me to sit here on your programme inventing evidence and reaching a conclusion myself. It's not something I'm willing to do.
You leave that to your Tory colleagues.
That's perfect. On Daily Politics with Andrew Neil. And that was Neil Baker, the Brexit minister for the Theresa May government. So this teaches us a lot. Hold your ground. There will always be smears. Bernie Sanders, if he runs again, you're going to see all sorts of tactics like this deployed against him. And the demand needs to be that mainstream presenters, people with those platforms like the BBC or CNN or whoever else, this video needs to be shared and constantly added, anchors in general, so that they can have some model of what debunking this kind of garbage looks like. And also, again, the democratic tendency to capitulate, to try to appease. These people can never be capitulated or appeased. They only need to be fought, defeated with clarity and purpose. So more momentum for Corbyn, and just really honestly the pleasure of that sketch, of that felt like a sketch, because it's something that I would have scripted.
It seemed very day to day.
It did seem like very
You broke the news.
Exactly. On a similar theme, let's actually get to the shout out here. Oh man, someone tweeted at me actually a picture of Birdman and Tony Braxton. It's just far out. I'm going to have to do an illicit history on it for patrons. Lee Carter is a DSA member of the Virginia State Senate. And in this clip that we're going to play, he is explaining why public-private partnerships don't work, why tax rebates to the private sector to incentivize behavior has not worked, and in fact is continuing to drive inequality and gentrification. And behind him, an absolute idiot named Mark Keim, who is also a Democratic state senator and a former Verizon lobbyist, is going to get on his iPad and flash a hammer and sickle behind Lee Carter. Let's watch this, and if you're listening, you can actually listen to a very intelligent assessment of why these kind of PPI's policies don't work.
And they're driving an hour and a half each way every morning to go to a job that pays $9 an hour. And in my district, we've got entire low-income neighborhoods where we're having to fight the bulldozers because we've got out-of-state money that's trying to come in and buy up property that people are living on right now and kicking them out. And, you know, it may make the locality look richer on paper. It'll look like you've done something about poverty. But at the end of the day, if this does what has happened in Northern Virginia, what will happen in Southwest and South Side and the Eastern Shore, and particularly, I think Petersburg is particularly susceptible to this. What will happen is you won't have any poor people in those localities anymore, but it won't be because you've helped the poor people. It's because you've moved them to other localities.
So I actually want to thank, this is a double shout out. First to Lee Carter, who's doing an incredible job in the Virginia State Senate, who was articulated perfectly why these sort of private incentive structures are not working in addressing poverty and inequality. In fact, they might be actually expanding those issues and making them worse. But also to this complete immature jackass fucking moron toolbox. In fact, he's literally the box that the tools come in. Mark Keim, for flashing the hammer and sickle, for basically perfectly showing us the state of modern politics inside the center to the left in this country. A former Verizon lobbyist, neoliberal jackass, flashing a hammer and sickle while a democratic socialist explains poverty and policy failings. The perfect distillation of neoliberalism and the failure of modern Democratic Party leadership. And then Lee Carter for explaining exactly why the policy apparatus that fools and hacks and jackasses like Mark Keim push for is completely failing real people, although in fact working perfectly well for companies like Verizon that fucking fool lobbied for. So dual shout out. Markeem, thanks for being you. You should be primaried. Your political career should be totally destroyed, and your only role in the history books should be as an example of a catalyst of when Lee Carter becomes elected governor of Virginia. We'll say, like, one of the things that actually helped push this improbable political journey along was when this fucking moron did a hammer and sickle behind Lee Carter while he was explaining why public-private partnerships and giving corporations incentives to deal with poverty issues obviously don't work. So double shout out on this week's Michael Brooks Show to neoliberal fool Markeem and on point social democrat Lee Carter.
It just shows how worried people are about all this stuff. I mean, this is going to be a common theme in different clips we play.
Yes.
Whether the Tories attacking Corbyn or like this happening, or Wayne LaPierre, who we'll play later, is people are worried about what actual democratic socialism looks like.
We have the momentum, and it's partially because we can transcend being lobsters. We have greater capacity. Every time I do a Jordan Peterson impression, I want to cry. We're going to have to do a thing where each of the three of us have onions so we can do full Jordan Peterson impressions.
Read Jordan Peterson quotes.
Yeah. It's the individual. That's where he goes. He is sort of like intellectual Glenn Beck on that shit with the crying and the emoting.
Yeah.
You were going to say, were you going to make a snotty remark about Glenn Beck being more intelligent or something?
No, I think of both of them, like, when you divorce them from their, like, fundamental anti-Marxism, which seems, like, very central to both those guys, their personalities are interesting to just dissect, like, from a non-ideological perspective. I don't know. Like, why that appeals, people want to go spend their time with men like that is...
I remember one time I read a review. There was a book... And I wouldn't put this guy, as far as I know, I don't know much about him, but there was a guy named Robert Bly who I think wrote a book like back in the day, like definitely like in the 80s or something, but it was called, I think it was called Iron John, and it was like about like it was some type of like masculinity book, but probably like more minus some of this reactionary politics basically. And he was I don't know much about him. I read one of his books later on called The Sibling Society, which is kind of interesting. But the reason I knew about Iron John was I was reading a collection of Martin Amis reviews, and Martin Amis wrote a review of Iron John. And of course, it being Amos, it was an extremely dickish review. And I remember one of the lines, though, that was really, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, in Britain, like, we don't like think about and go on seminars and read about like becoming men. We just get on with it. And that was like one of the most, like, that's like the way, if I wanted to be a real dick to like the Jordan Peterson, it's just a certain, like, just get on with it. But yeah, The Return of the Male by Martin Amis in the London Review of Books. Yeah, this is a pretty funny review. I mean, Robert Bly probably had more social conscience than Martin Amis does, but Amos is
not as funny of a writer.
Definitely not as funny of a writer. In fact, if you are like kind of like turned on to Hitch as a performer and as a writer, then you don't know who Martin Amis is, you should get into Martin Amis, because Martin Amis is more Hitchens than Hitchens, I would say.
A lot of what was good about Hitchens comes from his relationship with Martin Amis.
Definitely. And Martin Amis is a great, a good friend of mine once. He's a very big Martin Amis fan, and he was trying to go to a book signing for a Martin Amis book, but he couldn't make it, so he gave his copy of this Amis novel to his friend who was going, and Amis signed the book, and it was just this little thing, but he wrote, "Josh, where were you? Best, Martin Amis." It was just like perfect. Love Martin Amis. All right, so we're gonna get to Corey Pein in a minute, but first, guys, let me just tell you that, as I say, you know, each week we're growing. We're deeply committed to this project. We did the Wolfenstein game 2 weeks ago. That was a lot of fun. If you haven't watched on YouTube yet, check it out. Check out me and my gamer gear. Check out Matt and I both looking like school shooters, or terrifying facial expressions we were making while we were doing this. I'm talking, in fact, with an animator tomorrow. The sketches the animations of the sketches are coming along. There's going to be a TMBS YouTube channel specifically with clips for this show, so it's easy to share and kind of seed content. People have been asking me about that because they've been spreading the word. Patrons make the show possible, and they get a ton more content and experience. Discord, the post game, which is really fun. All of the illicit histories. Last couple, the Marx's critique of the Gotha program. Islamophobia as an instrument of foreign policy. This Sunday, we're going a deep dive into something called integral theory, which is a sort of map of organizing and understanding different competing value sets, and gives us actually a helpful toolkit for understanding the sort of modern culture wars. So, we're radical, we're having fun, and also really trying to give you the most relevant and alive histories, ideas, and people and ways to really win these battles we need to win. So, this is how we do it. This is how we're accountable to nobody but you. It's the only way I want it. The growth is fast. Let's keep it going. We're going to be setting our next goals soon for 2,000 and for 3,000 patrons. And so we're safe, secure, sustained, and then expanding and pushing. This Saturday for Comrade and Above, we're doing another call on Marxism and empathy. A lot of interesting material to get to there. And also, we're out for other folks at the higher levels. We sent out a solicitation for the voicemails you want and the different characters. So we're on the move on all fronts. Patreon.com/TMBS. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody. Keep spreading the word and keep joining. This is how we move, how we grow, how we impact the change we want to impact. We'll be right back with Corey Pein on The Michael Brooks Show. Back. We are on the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is Crew, host of News from Nowhere podcast, which everybody should check out on Patreon, author of the forthcoming, you can pre-order it, I have pre-ordered it, book, Live, Work, 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 Die, A Journey into the Savage Heart of Silicon Valley. My friend, Corey Pein. Thanks so much for being here, Corey.
Thanks you, Michael. It's always fun to come on TMBS.
It's always you are integral to what makes TMBS fun, my comrade.
You flatter me too much. I was just complaining in between about having to follow up Adam Curtis and Andrew Neil and Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, you missed the most difficult person to follow up.
Who was that?
Me.
Michael Brooks?
Yeah, that's
of
right.
Of course.
Yeah.
What was I thinking?
Yeah,
what was I thinking? There was no other possible answer there.
Fucking rando
Ridiculous.
British guys, yeah. That's inane. But I did play. We did select the cold open Adam Curtis stuff because you just came from a big, and I know you're writing about it. We're not going to step on your lead. But you got to tell me about this UFO conference that you were just at. Where was it? What was the title of it? What the hell's going on?
It's mostly I don't want to step on my my expense report for the baffler who's paying for this trip.
Now I have a lot more respect for your reticence. You've given me a material explanation, and that soothes my Marxist soul.
I was really hoping to join the Wolfenstein Fest, but I had to go to Arizona for the International UFO Congress, which claims to be the world's largest UFO convention. I have no reason to doubt that. And I went because...
that's what they want you to think.
It is exactly what they want you to think.
See?
It's advertising.
Right.
I went because some of your viewers, listeners may remember back in mid-December, the New York Times published this really crazy story with videos, two stories actually, about a secret Pentagon UFO program that Harry Reid got funded for a number of years and which is apparently still going on. And I just thought it was a subject that deserves some follow-up. And actually, the same day, like Politico and the Washington Post both had stories about this UFO program. So I've been kind of obsessed with it since, and that's why I went down to the UFO conference in Arizona.
Can you give just like a sense, and of course the article's coming out, you'll get into it a lot more detail, but I'm curious, like, is this like you know, I talked with my friend Bronwyn Dickey a while ago. She covers like conspiracy theory cultures, and I know you do too. So is this like more in that vein, like this is all just sort of like, you know, the secret alien conspiracy stuff? Or is this sort of like, we're interested in this kind of far out stuff, but we want to be like, does it have the trappings of like, no, this is actually serious, like policy, academic sort of like, do you see what I mean? Like, is it more Alex
Jones? Real or not?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, because actually, I will say, like, I don't have strong feelings about UFOs one way or another, and I do want to touch on the kind of Adam Curtis perspective about it in a second, but I don't, like, interest in UFOs is not like a crazy thing to be interested in, like, and certainly in terms of the full expansiveness of our universe, like, it's not like a, you know, it's a pretty safe bet that there's probably other sentient life. It doesn't mean they're traveling in spaceships, but, you know, it's not like a irrational thing to be interested in, per se.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I would say this. The conference was, I expected a kook fest, and it was actually something much more interesting than that. I would say that it was 30% kook, 30% sort of obsessive researcher / experiencer, like someone who thinks that they've seen UFOs or has been abducted or something like that. And then 30% current, former, retired military, police, and intelligence agency person, which with some overlap in all of those segments, right?
Yep.
So, you know, I guess what I would say is, you know, I ran a couple of excerpts of interviews I did at the conference on News from Nowhere. One was with the guy that used to run the UK Ministry of Defence's UFO program for a while in the 90s and has kept up on the subject. And another was with a British writer who is sort of a disillusioned UFO nut and now approaches the subject from a much more critical perspective. And both of them have concluded, coming at it from different perspectives, and I think this is reasonable, that something is going on with UFOs. The governments of at least the US and the UK, and probably a number of other countries, think it's interesting and or serious enough to research in a serious way with funding.
Right.
And at the same time, none of the credible people are prepared to say what it is.
Right.
So, you know, without, you know, I'm not sure exactly where my reporting, I don't have to file for another month yet on this story with the Baffler. So I'm still not sure exactly where my reporting is going to take me, but I will say that there's more to the subject than I would have assumed. I've been, sort of a skeptical journalist over the years, and spent a good number of words making fun of like people that sell crystals and believe that 2020 was going to be some kind of Mayan prophetic apocalypse.
Oh, you mean 2012?
2012, yeah.
No, 2020 is the real
2020
year.
is when the UFOs come.
2020 is the real year. Yeah, 2012. They misread the calendar. I'm actually doing a special on that too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but but the do you think though, like, what I find interesting though, like when we talk about how like the interest from like the military or the intelligence apparatus confers a certain legitimacy in the public mind. And what is more interesting to me, I mean, one thing is the Adam Curtis angle, which makes a lot of sense to me, which is that there was, there's all of these terrifying weapons systems and all sorts of things being tested, some of which might actually be like, if you live in the area, maybe like a threat to your health as an example, right? And so we're going to spread disinformation. We're going to say this is UFOs, but really what this is the military-industrial complex, right? So that's one thing that makes total sense to me, and I think that is pretty, established to some extent that was part of what was going on. The other thing, though, is like when you get into that sort of like military spy world and even like spend time, like I've spent not much time, but a little bit of time in Washington. And I could tell you that, like, I have heard more, like, far out, mind-stretching stuff from, like, starched shirt, ultra-conservative looking, and, like, actual people, like, have worked at the DOJ, have done consulting projects for whatever. People in Washington saying the most, like, out there stuff about, oh, yeah, aliens work at the Federal Reserve, and that's why blah, 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 right? Like, way more than, like, the most, like, out there looking people that you meet in, like, cool circles in New York or Cali or Western Massachusetts or something. And I guess my point being that, like, I mean, it could mean, okay, so these, like, the military, the intelligence system, they have access to information and, okay, I guess maybe these, wow, these really out there things could be true. I guess that's one plausible scenario. Another far more plausible scenario is that, like, people drawn to the intelligence and military world are, high functioning, crazy people themselves. And that's why, like, you get a lot of self-generated conspiracies from those worlds. You get a lot of like narratives that don't make sense. You get a lot of confirmation bias. You get a lot of hyped intelligence because if you're in that world, you are interested yourself in sort of like grand narratives and conspiracy theories on some level. I mean, that's another kind of piece of work that Adam Curtis has done, and and even in some ways like Le Carre novels kind of plays with some of those themes.
Well, you're absolutely right, and all of that, and the actual presence of proven disinformation, like what Adam Curtis was talking about in that clip that you played, makes it a really interesting subject.
Right.
And just say it's take for example one view I've heard, which is that this whole UFO thing is just a New Age religion.
Right.
Without getting into whatever evidence there may be or not be for craft or phenomenon or shared hallucinations or whatever your explanation is. Put that aside and just put it in the category of a new religious movement.
Right.
In that sense, then why does the government care, and why would they want to influence the way people think about this? And so there's so many levels on which the story operates that I just think it's such a nice break from listening to Trump every day, honestly. That
I'm sure he has thoughts on UFOs, though.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
and
sure
there's lots of conspiracy theorists who are trying to figure out what he's been briefed on and stuff. But your point about the intelligence people being crazy is well taken. I mean, look at Michael Flynn. I mean,
right, exactly. Michael Flynn is like the perfect. Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Alex Jones talked for years about his secret sources in the Pentagon and stuff. And, with everything that's happened in the last 2 years, I think it's pretty safe to assume that one of those sources was real and that his name was Michael Flynn.
Yeah.
he was feeding stuff to Alex Jones and then watching Alex Jones, because like that's the world
totally
he lives in.
safe conjecture. So yeah, no, I think Michael Flynn's like a perfect example. Like there's a guy who, people forget. Yes, he reached the heights of military and intelligence apparatus, and he didn't have a filter. I mean, that's like the most diplomatic way of putting it. The guy was a fucking deranged conspiracy lunatic, and he was in the heart of our policymaking apparatus and our intelligence apparatus. So, just because somebody from that world is playing with an idea definitely should not confer it any type of automatic legitimacy at all.
Or necessarily to delegitimize it.
Or,
I mean, there are
absolutely.
There are, with this UFO thing, there are the military. It's not just intelligence people, but other types of scientists are looking at things too, and the conclusions that people are making about it are much more in the, I guess I would say, metaphysical realm than the kind of sci-fi stories that we were used to hearing in the 90s. The last time the X-Files was big, so it's really, I'm having fun reporting this, and I had fun at the conference, and I guess that's all about about all I should say.
Well, let's get to your new piece briefly. You wrote for the Baffler. It's just coming out, and it's called "Blame the Computer: The Rise of the Fake Science that might kill us all."
That threatens to kill us. Keeps threatening to kill us.
That keeps threatening to kill us all. Let me read it again. Blame the computer: the fake science that keeps threatening to kill us all. Kill us. That keeps threatening to kill us. Corey, what is that fake science?
It's computer science, the field, the academic discipline of computer science. So I tell the story of how it came to be that there were computer science departments in universities all over the country and learned to code boot camps, and how this field, which didn't exist 70 years ago, was actually created. And now why it keeps threatening to kill us. And I make the argument that it's because it's not really science. It's a way of looking at the world and creating control systems. And so whenever we talk about computation, we're really talking about putting the decisions and the values of the programmers on sort of autopilot and forcing us to live in a system of their design. So
who are those programmers and what are those values?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I could go back to the beginning. I mean, the people that really got the before the field of computer science, we should say, why were there computers? I mean, basically, we're talking about military research aimed at making rockets land in the right spot and to crack cryptographic codes for militaries to communicate secretly. Everything about engineering and computation goes back to sort of militaristic value set ultimately. But after World War II, when you saw the development of digital computers, you saw these technologies migrating out into the private sector, first through big contractors like Raytheon and companies that actually made the machines for the military. After the war, they needed a new market for their equipment, and computers then were the size of rooms. They weren't like laptops and phone size, So they needed institutional customers. This was not stuff that they were going to be selling to the general public, certainly not at the price tag. So they eventually arrived at these computer salesmen, essentially. Defense contractors turned computer salesmen, arrived at the universities. Specifically, they went after universities that had a more of a entrepreneurial bent, like Stanford, MIT, and pitched them essentially on a model where they would buy the computers at a discount, train people to use them, and then they could rent out the excess computer time to third-party entities. So as soon as the computer was introduced to the university, it was as a profit center. So I tell the story of how some of these, academics and computer salesmen essentially introduced a new sort of profit model to the university and created a reason for administrators to hype this new field that they essentially created called computer science. At the time, it was mathematicians and physical scientists, the other sort of STEM fields, and even the humanities would have laughed at computer science as a discipline. Why not have a department of slide rule studies, for instance? Right.
Right.
But through commerce, this device came to be not just a piece of equipment, but something that signaled a certain value about how the human mind and will interacts with the rest of the world.
And so, is that sense like that basically like human agency, human judgment is fallible, and then we have these God, but in this case, sort of like Spock-like machines, which can supersede all of our mistakes and solve everything, entirely ignoring the fact that obviously, I mean, first of all, at least certainly at the time, and even now in the foreseeable future, humans are still cooperating with technology, and also that the people designing the technology are in fact human. So all of this, even you're not even escaping fallibility, and then you're also building in an assumption set that is diluted with regards to like how these things were actually designed and deployed.
Well, that's right, and specifically, that value set is militaristic and capitalist. I mean, the people that design these things do not have their imagination or their spec sheet does not expand to different possibilities. So one example I used for why this is a dangerous pedagogy or a dangerous way to view the world was back in January. Remember when, this is the lead of my story, and I spent some time investigating it. Remember back in January when Hawaii, basically the whole state freaked out because they got a false alarm about an incoming North Korean missile?
Yes.
I mean, it was kind of a one.
And now everybody's like forgotten it because there's obviously much more important things to attend to.
Yeah, I mean, so I looked into what happened a little bit, and I mean, the terror that people felt.
Yeah,
I mean,
course.
First of all, like how horrible. Just imagine yourself in that situation.
Right.
Like you wake up in the morning with a push notification on your phone that's like, "Hey, incoming missile."
Right.
Take cover. It's like, where? What? Huh?
Yeah.
So just a mass freak out on that level, and it took hours basically for the correct information to get out. And the first explanation that comes out is from the governor, who says basically what happened is somebody pressed the wrong button, and they weren't.
That's literally the explanation. Somebody pressed the wrong button. Yes.
Yeah, it was a drop-down menu like you might be used to seeing on your computer that had two options. One was like send missile alarm, and the other was test missile alarm. And basically they hit the wrong button. And the first story that came out is this was a veteran employee. They weren't going to get fired. It just was a screw up.
Mm-hmm.
And after people were not really happy about that. You need a scapegoat. So some weeks later, another report is done, and they ended up blaming the employee. And so they found their scapegoat. Right. But the questions I have are, how does it happen that we have a system where there's only two choices on this computer, which is like basically the you're going to live or you're going to die machine, right? As far as the public is concerned. How did we arrive at this point? And it's because we have dehumanized the process of politics, of urban design, of basically every aspect of life and society that you can think of is being run through a computer. So we get these systems where it's like test missile, launch missile. I mean, the whole aspect of planning has been outsourced. And remember that old 80s movie, War Games?
Yeah.
It actually holds up pretty well. I mean, the plot of it is about this very subject. The plot is about, the outsourcing of the decision to launch nuclear missiles to a computer. And much like Dr. Strangelove, there's more in that movie that's actually true to life than we might have appreciated as kids watching it. Anyway, it's my opinion. Some of this material was taken out of stuff that didn't make the cut for my book, but it's my opinion that we really need to decenter the computer from our life, and especially from our politics, because when we use these things to communicate or to devise policy, we're really being guided down certain paths of thinking that we might not even be aware of.
Do you think that, and this to me actually speaks to one of the things that is so frustrating and dangerous about responding to Trump in the time of Trump, because, and let's make this distinction clear. Of course, having a ground in certain empirical realities and understanding that yes, that certain types of facts and agreed upon realities are important, okay? They are shared frameworks. They are relevant. At the same time, we know that, first of all, facts are contested, and not just in like the easy way that we can say like, okay, well, obviously Trump is lying about everything. That's the easy stuff. The harder stuff is the debate between people like us who say we don't want to outsource all human agency to guided computer systems by a narrow part of the techno-military industrial complex. And then people in response who go like, I don't know what that means. That's irrational, right? Like that's actually a debate about values, about historical context, about how we actually kind of set policy and what is the balance of technocracy versus democracy. So much of the response to Trump and so much of the modern like liberal obsession is that facts in and of themselves are somehow liberatory. And the problem is that number one, all of us are using shortcuts. So I have some sense, as an example, of climate science as a layperson. I have some sense of it myself, some reading, some understanding, but I'm also using what I think to be a sensible shortcut on some level, which is that I'm going to trust the preponderance of science. And those are the sources that I'm going to read. And those are the people I'm going to seek out that aren't funded by industry to debunk the consensus, right? But it's still a form of a shortcut. And we all make that in situations of complexity. None of us are just pure calculating information processing machines. We both are literally not designed that way in terms of our actual decision making, and none of us actually have the pure sort of processing power or time to act like that. And if we did anyways, and there's actually interesting research that Antonio Damasio had, who's a neuroscientist, actually had patients where like sort of some of these sort of emotional parts of our decision making were cut off, and people, instead of being like these brilliant rational actors, actually couldn't make any type of sort of basic decisions because they had no shortcut process, right? That's one part of it. And then that number two, even when facts that are, facty enough are broadly, disseminated, it doesn't really have much of an influence on our politics. We still have these, grids of belief, whether it's because people are, adamantly committed to a certain belief system and they won't let facts conflict with that, or because, industries distort debate. And then, that number three, there's been this whole group of people, I think actually in some ways starting with the Bush administration, and maybe there was a healthy part of this more so then than now of like, look, no, you're lying about WMDs. They're not there. They're not in Iraq. This isn't true. And that's a healthy impulse. But that is if, all right, roll the tape. This is what the person actually said, or these are the actual CDC statistics. That has any sort of innate potential to really move anybody is very, very shaky ground. And it seems like, we have a certain kind of politics of people who both are not admitting their own fallibility in terms of their own relationship to facts and how they make decisions. And then also they think that facts and empirical realities are some type of incredible liberatory force, which they're simply not.
You're picking up on everything I'm hoping that sparks in people's minds when I write about these subjects. In one sense, what I'm proposing with this piece, Attacking Computer Science, is that especially for the left, we need to go on the offensive when it comes to people like Jordan Peterson.
Right.
Like, let's talk about your assumptions. Let's talk about your science. What makes it scientific?
Right.
And really engage on that level. Because I think we've ceded a ton of territory, especially when it comes to science and technology. Basically, technology being equated with science.
Yep.
And technology also seeming to imply some, or to confer some like superior discernment about the world and how it should be ordered, right?
Right.
And so I think we need to go on the offensive when it comes to questions like that, which is why I go after computer science.
Yeah.
And say that it's fake, but UFOs are real, and they deserve to be in. Because we're talking with UFOs about a genuine mystery, right? We're talking about something that has been unexplained, in the most interesting cases. So let's talk about what are other legitimate subjects for science, right? And then we can open up the conversation about economics in a different way as well. Right. And it's not as though there aren't people already doing this. I'm just saying that we cede less ground on questions of reason. What constitutes reason? What constitutes science? And I'd also like to point out that on this question of mysteries being a legitimate realm for scientific inquiry, that's something that the left should remember when it comes to a rhetorical, political level too. You mentioned, these facts, statistics without the power to move people.
Yeah.
I think that mystery and imagination are both they're much more powerful when it comes to capturing people's hearts and minds than statistics. And so I'm also proposing that we argue in a different way. Yes. And we make room for mystery, and we make room for people with what may seem to be to us ridiculous beliefs, right?
And also, I think counter-narrative, I just want to add really quickly, I think it's also very important because this is also the point where we get into play where healthcare is a great example of this. Yes, no question you can make the case that single-payer universal healthcare for overall net economic impact is more rational and would, except for the obvious businesses which strangled the industry in the United States. So that's already like a major caveat in terms of actual politics. But you could say for the car industry, for retail, single payer would be better overall, net economic gain, right? But our task, in my view, is to not only say it's both the right thing and the rational thing to do. I'm saying even if single payer was completely economically inefficient and would not improve the bottom line of these companies, I would still demand that we have it, because rational delivery is not a be-all, end-all in and of itself. That's a second-order thing. It's not a first-order thing. So I don't buy into that framework to begin with. If every single kid in the country who needs an inhaler needs to get an inhaler, whether that's efficient or not, is irrelevant to me.
Well, right, and now we're having a conversation about values, and that requires that's not somewhere that the Jordan Petersons of the world necessarily want to go, except they get a little dodgy on that stuff, right? Except to talk about in cliches about liberal principles.
But there's lobsters, and then they have hierarchies, so you can't have an inhaler because that's Stalinism. And why do bitches wear lipstick? And then we're on stronger ground. Final question, Corey, and please use this as an opportunity to plug your book, which everybody needs to pre-order and read. I've heard through the grapevine, and by grapevine I mean a piece I read a while ago in the New Republic, that Peter Thiel has left Silicon Valley because his ideas are not received there. And he's just really oppressed because apparently libertarian fascism isn't fashionable in Silicon Valley. So he's moving to LA. this leaves me with a couple of questions. One would be, I think actually LA is overall pound for pound a more centered place than Silicon Valley. Number two, really, Silicon Valley, there isn't a huge audience for libertarian fascism, or which I should basically just say fascism. Become a patron, listen to Corey and I's 2-part history of Silicon Valley fascism. And number three, is this like peak right-wing, like self-agreement, like a predator sociopath billionaire who has like bankrupted Gawker, done everything imaginable to harm the public interest, and it's still like on the board of Facebook, but it's just not enough?
I mean, Thiel is not the first. There's been some stories about a sort of exodus of the, the most right-wing Silicon Valley oligarch types, and I'm not sure how much I believe it. I mean, we have to consider the extent to which many of these people were already transnational persons. I mean, the New Yorker had a story a year or two ago about Thiel buying, his end of the world property in New Zealand. So to an extent, what did he really inhabit that place in the same way that I live in Portland and you live in Brooklyn? I mean, I don't think so. Right. So let's consider that. But there was another rich guy from Silicon Valley, Sam Altman, whose views are similar to Thiel's on many things, and he runs the tech incubator / venture capital fund Y Combinator, and he wrote a whole essay that I think gives up the game. It was about how much more free speech there was in China than in Silicon Valley, and if only people could be more open-minded in America. Now, what kind of free speech was he concerned about? Basically, he's excited and invested in a lot of genetic startups that are interested in things like genetic engineering human fetuses and cloning and things like that, which the U.S. just probably rightly decided to regulate heavily and restrict and be very cautious with. So for him, the free speech that matters is the free speech to mess with human embryos to your heart's content. And never mind, in every other respect, is what a place that these libertarian bros would find completely objectionable. Single party state that happens to be the Communist Party. Complete vertical economic integration. Anything that matters, it's command and control economy.
But don't you think that actually is like what the Bezos vision is? Like when you look at China, it's like, okay, yes, it's called communist, but it's like, all right, yes, it's vertically integrated. Well, these companies and the goals of Silicon Valley are actually all monopolistic. And then you mediate public opinion in China. China has very sophisticated measures of public opinion gauging and monitoring. So there is actually some public responsiveness. And then decision-making is all centralized by, whatever the equivalent of philosopher kings are. So yes, maybe with, a little bit less bureaucracy and actually probably less sort of like pretend commitment to national delivery, which actually there still is some in the Chinese Communist Party, and even though it's obviously unbelievably corrupt and abusive, I think that China is precisely the map that these people want.
Well, yeah, except there's no party. There's just
corporation
Amazon or
Google. Exactly. Yeah. Just replace the
Palantir.
Central Committee with Palantir, Amazon, and Google. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And then they're in their vision, and I do talk about this in my book. I mean, you would just choose which company you wanted to affiliate yourself with.
Right.
If you're watching this show, you know where that critique falls apart. I mean, it almost doesn't warrant us spending the time going over it, because we're talking about entities that already have monopolistic economic power. I mean, how could you possibly have free choice?
Right.
As an individual in this society, you have nothing.
Right. So, Corey, on that hopeful note, explain to people how they can feel even more optimistic after they read. But I mean, really, in all seriousness, like, gotta pre-order and read Corey's book. So tell people how they can do that again, please.
Well, I would say go to Amazon or your favorite indie bookseller here in Portland. It would be Powell's.com. But
I ordered it. Well, I ordered it through Powell's, so it doesn't matter where you are. You can order
yeah, they'll ship wherever.
Yep.
And the book is called Live, Work, 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 Die: A Journey into the Savage Heart of Silicon Valley. It will actually show up in bookstores in your mailbox in sometime late April. I think April 24th. I will be in New York, D.C., the Bay Area, Seattle, Portland, doing readings, and who knows, we'll see after that. So yeah,
we got to get you some like protection from Peter Thiel. Like, so we meet again, Mr. Pein.
He's ignored all my emails. So I think it's gonna.
I can't wait. I'm working on a project where you can actually block people in real life, in the sense of they send you an email and you put it into your trash bin and then they're killed. In China, they're open to this idea because they support free speech, but not in America.
I think you might be the one that has to watch out for Peter.
He's like the one person that people are like, other people I like make fun of and stuff. They're like, I'm like, yeah, send that shit. I don't care. Peter Thiel. I'm like, it's really all right. This is not a guy who needs to know what I'm doing.
all I did was look up his college freshman photo.
Corey Pein, Michael Brooks Show crew, host of News from Nowhere podcast, author of the forthcoming book that everybody needs to pre-order, Live, Work, 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 Die: Journey into the Savage Heart of Silicon Valley. Corey, thanks a million.
Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. All right, everybody, here's what we're going to do. We are going to briefly do a pyramid segment, and then Trevor Beaulieu, co-host of Champagne Sharks and paisan, comrade, major fan of the new Black Panther movie, is going to be. I was amazed at how much he loved this movie. We actually have a response from Nation of Islam Obama, which we're going to be playing about Black Panther as soon as Trevor gets on here. But first, we have to go to the pyramid. The pyramid is, of course, a segment that began when I requested that Robbie Mook be locked in a pyramid. And this week, the pyramid involves the cowardice, stupidity, of course, hypocrisy of the DCCC in two cases. One, the Congressional Campaign Committee has put out memos advising candidates to not speak bravely and clearly on gun issues after the shootings in Las Vegas, as an example, the mass carnage and murder there. They want to play safe and have no response to this gun cartel that holds public health hostage. Don't worry about all this gun culture stuff. Worry about a private capitalist interest that has no concern for mass murder and public health whatsoever, controls and dominates the political process, and Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee advising its candidates to not speak clearly and bravely and advocate obvious things on it. Now, I have some maybe untypical positions on gun control, and I'm still thinking some of these issues out, to be honest. But some of this stuff is so commonsensical and so bare minimum that the idea that you wouldn't advocate for them is sort of beyond cowardice and so evocative of all continued, even though there's been marginal improvements, Democratic Party failings. And in Texas, speaking of Democratic Party failings, there's a great candidate running for the House. Her name is Laura Mosier, and she is the creator of Daily Action. It's a text messaging tool that targets the Trump administration and has actually been pretty effective in dealing with the agenda. The DCCC has released Oppo research on her during a primary, which essentially consists of taking a piece of writing she did out of context to make it look like she's attacking Texas, which is where, of course, she's running. And then also, more seriously, it accused her of double dealing and corruption because a contract for her campaign went to a firm that her husband works for called Revolution Advertising. Excuse me, not Revolution. Excuse me, where is this? Yeah, Revolution Messaging. This is a consulting firm that Arun Chaudhry is a partner in, and she's married to. Now, Revolution Messaging worked for Bernie Sanders. It's a very reputable left shop, and there is double dealing in this type of, not even necessarily double dealing, I mean, contracts given all over the DCCC. So the notion that this is somehow exceptional or different when, even as an example, the DCCC's independent, I'm reading now from The Intercept, the DCCC's independent expenditure director, for instance, is Jessica Mackler, the spouse of Blueprint Interactive partner Jeff Mackler. Federal Election Commission disclosures show that Lizzie Pannell Fletcher, Moore's opponent, retained Blueprint Interactive to help the campaign on its digital consulting work, paying the firm $7,500 in September. That actually seems like far more of a conflict of interest and questionable ethically than what Laura Mosier did, which doesn't actually seem to be a problem to me in terms of reality. There's another candidate, and there's 3 candidates in the primary, one of whom is a former Goldman Sachs banker who claims that the DCCC actually recruited him. So, even in this moment of mass populist revolt, mass crisis in the country, and assault on what little tiny remnants of a social safety net we had to begin with, the DCCC is still playing small, cowardly, and only occasionally being ballsy when it involves attacking a great progressive candidate. So, this week, DCCC in the motherfucking pyramid. These son of a bitches. All right, let's. Do we have got some music ready? I want to have Trevor here to hear the Nation of Islam Obama sketch. So maybe we could just play a brief bumper and then just get him set up. Sure. Welcome back, Michael Brooks Show. Michael Brooks here, along with Matt Leck, David Grisham, David Slavic, not on site, but of course here in the Discord. And joining us now is Trevor Beaulieu. He is co-host of Champagne Sharks, friend of the show. I'm friend of Champagne Sharks too, actually.
Yeah. It's mutual. It's mutual.
I'm a reg.
I might not give you good radio today. I'm a mess. I had some chicken wings. They didn't warn me beforehand that there's no ranch, no blue cheese. Just, I'm not in the right space.
You're really coming in with some strong black stereotyping right out of the
gate.
You're like, I'm here to talk about Black Panther, but I'm tired because I just ate chicken wings.
And
okay.
No, I'm not tired.
And I'm
complaining
about.
I'm angry.
Okay, you're angry.
Did you have no sauce then?
They had no sauce. What
was this establishment? Drag them.
Yeah, okay, I'll drag him. It's Fletcher's in DeKalb Market.
Oh.
They didn't have blue cheese is what really counts. Ranch is a poor man's blue cheese, but I would have taken it. And they didn't have that either. But I'll work that energy into the.
Yeah, you
radio
gotta
today.
get the anger going. I actually one time remember Bill Burr told this hysterical story where he was touring with Charlie Murphy and one other black comedian whose name I forget, and he said that like they always would just like clown on him for being poorly dressed.
Yeah.
And like, you know, and he had a great time and whatever. And he's just like, but there was just like one day where like they had like a 4-hour, like some like long car trip ahead of them. And they had been up late the last night and he just needed them to shut up and like not bother him.
Yeah.
So he's just like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And they're like, he went to Popeyes. And he went up to them and he was like, guys, look, I brought you lunch. And then they were like, oh, thanks, man. And they devoured it. And then they fell asleep in the car and he had a peaceful drive.
That would work.
And he was like, this is how you manage your black buddies
Oh,
who
my
won't
God.
bother you about your shirt looking sloppy all the time.
I call it vitamin P.
So, this will help warm you up. So, we're talking a little bit about Black Panther, and before we get to it and Trevor's thoughts on it, we have a little bit of found audio. Apparently, we know that Nation of Islam Obama has a relaunched WB show, which I know you're familiar with, Trevor. But this is actually he's also, like everybody else now, he's biting our style. He's in the podcast
God.
game.
Yeah, I'm a Patreon.
Yeah, he has a Patreon. That's the Barack O Show. Get exclusive content. What devil needs to be burned this week? What honky do I want to necklace the most? That's only for patrons. This is a free teaser of full Patreon content. Oh, my God. My mind went racing on that. All right, here's Obama, Nation of Islam Obama, responding to Black Panther. Cut the music. Cut it. Cut it. I haven't been this deflated in ages. You know, I pride myself, and by the way, this is why this is being released as a podcast, not for my normal WB show. I've prided myself on never trusting the white devil ever. And that includes his films, his TV networks. We all know why Bill Cosby got caught up in all those charges. He was going to buy NBC. But I let myself fall into the devil's game and get excited about Black Panther, only to discover that Black Panther is a little Bill Cosby, pull your pants up bitch who doesn't want to do a goddamn thing about international revolution for the black man, and then Killmonger's the motherfucking villain. It's bullshit. I haven't been able to get out of bed for a week. I still have my Black Panther costume, but I don't know whether to wear it or burn it. Hashtag Killmonger was right. That's what I was trying to do. We'll keep fighting. But you won this one, devil. You won this one, honky. Black Panther's ruined. Allahu Akbar. So I feel like there's a lot of parallel in Barack Obama's thinking and your thinking about Black Panther.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. See, now I don't know what to say because you said everything I was going to say. Right? Now everything I do is going to be redundant.
You were going to say that that Black Panther is a Bill Cosby pull yourself by your boot pants, by your bootstrap.
I mean,
bitch.
in that neighborhood, you know, all the white devil stuff, everything. I was almost word for word. I'm almost worried that you read my mind.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Random question.
Yeah.
What is the deal with this desk? Because there's always the most interesting books on it. Like
it's my desk.
Is it?
Yeah.
This
is where I sit when I'm co-hosting Majority Report.
Oh, so it's all the stuff that you happen to be reading at any given moment, or?
It depends. I have read probably most of the stuff on the desk. I don't know what's in front, but I don't know what's up there.
Yeah, like Catalyst.
Okay, yes, reading Lost Connections is I'm reading that because I'm interviewing Johan Hari in a couple weeks, and then Catalyst, yes. So that is all actually.
Yeah, it's always interesting
reading.
Stuff. Yeah, that's it.
No, I appreciate that. So Black Panther. I mean, I'm totally happy to take this in the direction of how smart I am. It's no problem. But if you want, we could talk about Black Panther. I am really curious, though, because like, I guess, you know, I almost feel like this should come last. But, I mean, my first question is, like, this has taken off like wildfire, and I do want to know your argument about Black Panther. But like, I guess out of the way, like, do you think? I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I think it's very worthwhile to debate cultural products and talk about them, and movies matter, and music matters, and books matter, and sports matter, and video. All of it matters. But at the same time, I do think that like the obsession with a cultural product like this actually probably points to some much, much deeper problems that we're not addressing.
I agree. And
also maybe shows that like there is some part of me, honestly, that is like, Jesus Christ, this is a fucking Marvel movie. Like, what do people want here? How important is this argument?
See, one thing that's tough is you haven't seen the movie, right?
No.
Okay.
So it's fine.
See, it's interesting in that.
But I have read, like, okay. I've actually been involved in, like, I've read the piece of the Boston Review about black masculinity. I've read Adam Seward. Like, I understand, you know, what people are pulling out of this for purposes of this conversation, other than like whether I think it's cool or not. I'll see it. Yeah. I'll see it in a couple of weeks. I don't want to ruin black people's viewing experience. A tweet from a very precious,
good ally?
silly white liberal.
I'm literally convinced. Has anybody checked to see if she's real? Like, I just don't want to believe she's real.
Can we find that tweet?
Yeah,
that is one of the most. Tweet. That was one of the most. You know. The one thing I will say is people like that are giving white people like me the experience that black people have always been burdened with, of feeling like if one person does something, we're all being judged by it, and it's embarrassing.
I didn't even want to research it in case it was like a troll. Like, I just wanted that to be real because that was just too funny.
It'd be great if after she tweeted it out, she saw some like, you know, like black high school students like walking by her stoop, and she was just like, I had to call the cops. What are these kids doing there?
She was looking out her window at the kids on the stoop while she was typing the tweet.
This is like always what I assume every time I see something like that. I'm always like, oh my God, you probably literally personally ejected somebody from their home.
Yeah.
Like, you were probably like the greatest avatar of like white destruction imaginable.
I believe it.
There's only so many ways you could get involved in such silly shit. Okay.
Like, that name just looks so fake.
It does sound really fake. Emily Lockdwella, Lake.
Oh, actually, I'm wrong. I did research her, and she had a blog, so I think she actually is real.
So this is literally what she wrote. And then, you know, tee off of this. So I carefully did not buy hashtag Black Panther tickets for opening weekend because I did not want to be the white person sucking black joy out of the theater. The fucking ego of that statement is unbelievable. What's an appropriate date to buy tickets is next weekend.
What does carefully did not buy tickets mean? Like, how do you recklessly not buy tickets? Like how is it like you can just accidentally trip and fall on something and buy a ticket? Like it's like Fandango opening her laptop and she's not paying attention. She leaves her elbow on the keyboard and I just bought some tickets. Like, I don't understand like why carefully is there. Like, why didn't she just say? This is the pedant in me. Like, what if she did not just say, I did not buy Black Panther tickets? The carefully thing is putting steam out of my ears. I don't know.
It's almost as bad as the blue cheese not being there.
Yeah.
But this is the type of, but not only like is this like so just like uneasy and weird in of itself, this is the type of shit that like Joe Rogan can run with for 6 months to explain how silly we all are for like, you know, like this sort of like woke performative stuff, especially because it's associated in the public mind with left, even though I don't consider it to be left, it's so toxic for our brand. Like, as funny as it is, this is like this is disastrous actually.
Yeah, but I'm
from
trying
a public
to find
brand perspective.
I'm trying to find the person. I'm looking on Twitter now because there's two sides of this equation, and there was this because there's a certain, you know, these black people that are part of what I call the white ally industrial complex. Like, it's just like these black people.
The white ally industrial complex.
Yeah, you know, there's a whole media construct and academic construct of black people whose whole job it is to just court, educate, and be like racial therapists to white allies.
Right.
And
right.
And it's kind of like S&M, like was it BDSM type of relationship, but a woke version where it's like the white person comes by and says like, please flog me, mistress, and then they're like, yeah, sure, and they whip them with some flagellation of whatever. But there was a black girl who wrote a whole thread lecturing white people on where and when to be able to see the movie, and the thing went viral in itself. So it's kind of like a two-way street,
Right.
because there's a certain amount of black people that kind of feed into this nonsense to begin with as well. And then she got dragged so bad on Twitter, she ended up trying to say later that she was
joking.
Yeah, but she clearly wasn't.
But that's impressive. That means she got really effectively dragged.
Oh yeah. Black people were like dragging her.
It's also like, especially because like, again, people need to remind themselves that this is literally like, this is as corporate as it gets. This is literally a Hollywood manufactured Marvel movie. So like, if we're interested just in like representation on that level, and I think actually we all should be, and it is important and it does matter, like telling like whatever white people, like 70% of the population, to not buy tickets on opening weekend to Black Panther, it's like a fucking disaster.
Yeah, very
Could you imagine
counterproductive.
like Black Panther's like, yeah, it opened at like 8 in the box office. We had this like massive budget. We took this risk, and white people didn't see it. Is like a textbook example of Hollywood just being like, yeah,
there you go.
Black Panther is actually going to be like Bagger Vance in the next like Matt Damon needs to learn how to play golf in the Segregated South movie, and like the magical black guy is going to do that instead of liberating black people and burning down white people's homes. Yeah, that's what he's going to do. And but he'll only have like 5 minutes of screen time. Like that would literally be like the lesson if people took any of that nonsense to heart.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous. It's crazy.
But dude, all right, now you're warmed up.
Yeah.
Talk about Black Panther. What's going on there?
Okay. Your original question was about it just being a Marvel movie, and there's something that shows how the culture is broken. Right. And I'm kind of a hypocrite on this because I agree with you in certain ways. Like, for example, Jamil Smith did this cover story for Time about the Black Panther, and it was the most ridiculous, over-the-top thing. Like, have you seen it?
No, but is my board up? Every time I see something by Jamil Smith, this always goes through my mind. I have no idea why. Every piece of writing and tweet by Jamil Smith, I feel like should just have the rose bedded under it, because it's all like precious, saccharine, sanctimonious, kind of. I don't know why. He kind of grates on me. I'm sure he's a nice guy.
Oh yeah, he seemed like a nice guy.
Yeah.
But it was a super long piece. I can't believe he got cleared to write this many words about it and not say anything. And he was tying it into the real Black Panthers, and he covered everything under the sun. And then when you see the movie, like, did he even see the movie when he wrote that? Like, a lot of it was even opposite of the movie. Like, that stuff I think is ridiculous. When you try to say this movie's the next big step in civil rights, and it's this movie.
Did he really actually make that argument?
I mean, he was trying to tie it into this long Black radical tradition, the movie, in the most over-the-top ridiculous way. It's
Jamil, it's a bunch of bullshit.
He did like it had to be like 6,000 words at least. It was really long.
All right, wow,
and it was the cover.
Yeah,
and like all the way.
It's very me. I only started reading stuff when the negative stuff came out.
So, this came out before the movie, and it was. He tried to kind of make it seem like it was part of this tradition, which it wasn't. It's weird, but when people try to take this movie and try to make it into something that's going to save people, there was this campaign about the Black Panther Challenge where they were raising money to send kids to the Black Panther, and activists were saying stuff like, a lot of poor kids, or being poor can make you entertain suicide and depression. So we're helping. Like, he was putting so many extras on what he was doing by taking them.
Wait, explain to me this. Wait, so some guy's raising money to take kids to go see Black Panther.
Yeah.
Which already sounds like an elaborate child abduction plot.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
Terrible joke. I'm sorry. So he's raising money, and I'm saying, okay, so people did the response probably of like, well, wait a second, why aren't you raising money to like, I don't know, get kids medical care, or expand, after school program, or like, sort of like on urgent needs for poor communities.
Yeah.
And his response was like, kids get really sad when they're poor, so they need an escape.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like, if a kid's like depressed to the point of suicide. Like 2 hours of entertainment, you're just gonna put off that suicide for like who knows how long. Like this is not gonna.
That's a
cure
very like
poverty.
depressing and weird reading.
Yeah.
That like, okay, so we're gonna raise a bunch of money to temporarily alleviate. I mean, but do you buy though? Like, I mean, obviously, like we can caricature it because that is kind of silly. But then on the other hand, like I think Kendrick Lamar like bought out a couple of theaters and sent some kids to see that, and that's like actually, you know, that is nice.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there is like. Do you think there's any value in like that experience of a little kid seeing like, you know, I get to be a superhero too? Like, do you see, is there any validity in that beyond the like silly caricature of you know, of what that guy's, you know, sort of overhyping what he was doing?
Well, see, he's part of the problem to me. Is I feel like there's value to it, but only if you keep it in perspective. Like, hey, kids, here's a field trip. Do you want to see a movie?
Right.
You see the movie.
Right.
But I feel like I don't like, this is what creeps me out, when people try to keep telling these kids that they feel worthless until they saw this movie. Because I feel like a lot of these adults have that feeling themselves.
Yeah.
And then they kind of project that on the kids. Like I'm not convinced those kids really hate themselves as much as these adults keep telling them that they hate themselves.
There's a lot of condescension in that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also a lot of these people who are doing this are kind of like these like woke activists, blue check Twitter types. And I think a lot of those guys go to like majority white schools, majority white neighborhoods, and they might have these issues. And then they're trying to pretend that they're taking these poor black kids. But I don't think these poor black kids that they're taking in these black neighborhoods have that type of same constant anxiety.
Are you saying there's like a class sort of divide in it? Is that what you're speaking to with inside like black community? That like if I hear you right, you're saying like, okay, I might be in a neighborhood or a place that's like, you know, incredibly like difficult to be in because of material conditions and because of racism and because of lack of like real things.
Yes.
And of course, conditions affects emotion and psychology. But at the same time, you might say, like, I don't know, like, I've got a good family, I've got friends, I've got teachers, I've got a social life. Like, there's a lot going on in me, and I have a lot of positive references for where I come from, too. So that, like, this inbuilt sense of, like, it's all just desperate and bleak and horrible, and I just need a Marvel movie is, like, some type of misplaced like middle class escapism. I mean, is that what you're saying?
I think there's part of that, but I also think the kind of problems that do give these kids an existential angst is much deeper than representation.
Right.
So it's like, I'm not saying that these kids are feeling like happy-go-lucky and clicking their heels, but their problem isn't so much like, hey, I'm suffering from microaggressions from my white friends, or I need representation. I need representation.
They're suffering from like aggressions from their non-white friends.
Yeah, might be that. Yeah, it might be that. Or it could be like the cops. Could be.
Well, that's what I kind of meant.
Oh yeah. Being
aggressions from your non-white friends means cops.
Yeah. So like they're not worried about, you know, hey, did Rihanna get the cover of Vogue?
Or excuse me, your white non-friends. That's why that joke.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me, that's what I meant. Go ahead.
Oh, white non-friends.
Right.
Yeah. There you go.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, it's good to even clear that up. You would have gotten grief over that.
Bring it. Black Panther suck.
The concerns are very bourgeois. Like you know what I mean? Like it's what they're worried about. Like when they see Black Panther running alongside Captain America side by side, I think they see that these activists, and it makes them think of their white workplace where the white guy gets more credit, and it's like, hey, it's their own fantasy. Like I'm getting as much credit, I'm as respected as my white coworker. I don't think these kids care about representation that much. They have bigger. Like somebody tweeted the other day, they were like. It was a black guy. He was like, you know, when I used to go watch superhero movies grow up, I used to watch the movies enjoy them and go home. I never wished I was white. It's like you weirdos are projecting all these issues on these kids.
What about also like mashup cult? Like this also goes to I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I think it's Edward Hall. No.
Edward T. Hall, is that
Edward T. Hall? Is that right?
the anthropologist?
No, not
Stuart
Edward
Hall?
Stuart Hall. Actually, Edward T. Hall isn't right. Edward T. Hall is beyond culture. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of Stuart Hall.
Okay.
So it's like Stuart Hall would write like the sort of like early like his angle on cultural studies being that like yes, there was like mass dominant cultures and corporate, commodification of culture that told standardized narratives, but that people, marginalized and oppressed peoples would actually take those dominant, storylines and recast them in their own image. So like Wu-Tang didn't watch like a bunch of superheroes and martial arts movies and want to be that. They mashed it up and incorporated it into their own universe.
That's a great
and created something new.
That's a great example. And like right now, I'm on a Bollywood movie kick.
Yeah.
Right, where I'm watching those.
Yeah.
And those movies, they take Western style movies and then just redo them in, their own style, and they add their own cultural cues.
Right.
To make it distinctly Indian. So kind of how Wu-Tang took those kung fu movies, but they weren't trying to be Chinese. They kind of reshaped them for like a hood narrative.
They were doing global culture for real.
Yeah.
Which is that you're taking like, that is one of the great advantages we have in our time right now.
Yeah.
You can be at home in Norway, Haiti, India, in some sense culturally. You have that access literally just through accessing products from everywhere, and you can synthesize it.
Yeah, that's a great example. See, because like Wu-Tang was in a black environment.
Right.
So they could just take it and not use it to hate themselves.
Yeah.
And then just recast it. And the same with those
No, they
people
use
in
it to
Bollywood.
create their own universe.
Yeah.
Which actually is what the best of all that stuff does. So they really were like creating their own like secret mystical order, not by pretending they were in China, but by bringing those elements and mashing it up with where they were.
Yeah, and these like bourgeois black writers, these black liberal like blue check media people and activists, they exist in white spaces. A lot of them always write articles about how they grew up among white people, how they discovered their blackness late. So I think when they see these movies, it's not that they can go back home in their own black communities and reshape them. They have to digest and process these movies in all white space. So when they do it like that, there's no chance to kind of recast it and do it in a new narrative. They're experiencing it in a predominantly white environment, and then all it does is just remind them of I think problems they had growing up in those environments. Like, when I grew up in this all-white school, I was always getting passed over for the blonde cheerleader. I was always an outcast compared to whatever.
Just a little Barry Mason for getting passed over for the blonde cheerleader.
I was like looking around.
I know. Just a little Barry Mason, dude. It's all good.
Yeah, so that's my take on it. And I don't think these kids like hate themselves as much as these people want to tell them. I think they're doing what you said with these movies. Like they're going home and one kid's like, "Hey, I'll be Captain America. You be Iron Man." There's just two black kids and they're just playing those roles. I don't think two kids go home and say, "Well, I guess we can't play now because neither of us are white."
Which isn't to say that, like, I mean, I guess, like, I want to get specifically back into the Killmonger thing because I actually do have a disagreement with you on that, and I will state it vigorously because, and even having not seen the movie because I'm white, I think though that like there's, if we crudely kind of classified, I think there's three different positions, right? Like I think there is like a very, very almost crude fundamentalist position where people like us could come from, which is like representation doesn't matter and it's all like actual real conditions, right? And I don't think that's true. I think that it does matter. I am actually interested, like, to me it is interesting, like I think like Barack Obama being president is in dispute, like that matters profoundly on a cultural level for everybody, in fact. A movie with in a kind of fantasy universe, I feel like maybe the elevation of the importance of that is a little disproportionate, but I could totally be wrong. But it seems like on the other side, what kind of starts to happen with Black Panther and some of these conversations in general is like the elevation of representation at the expense of like literally everything else.
Yeah, I agree.
That there is
I agree
no, kind of broader.
It's the be all end all of the
and
conversation.
that is a very disturbing and really shows. I think that a certain type of knockoff woke intersectional politics at this point is really telling on itself because it has no ability to deal with anything that isn't of this world. It has no ability to deal with white people that aren't like that lady.
Yeah, exactly.
And it has no ability to deal with the actual meat and muscle of everything from capitalism to white supremacy. And it's in this cloistered universe demanding types of sort of word games and representations, which for both really terrible and horrible reasons most people aren't caught up with, and also for some good reasons other people are allergic to because they want to do actual politics.
I also think a lot of these people are kind of careerists.
Yeah.
So a lot of their activism is kind of proxies for their own careerist struggles. So they kind of think like, if Black Panther gets to be represented as the equal or peer of Captain America, that translates to me getting the same opportunities as the white writers at my newspaper or magazines. Like, I really think these are their fantasies.
Yeah.
And they kind of realize on some level it's childish. So they have to pretend they're doing it for the kids. That's my theory on it. They have to kind of act like, look at these kids. The kids like, huh? The kid doesn't even know really what's going on.
I'm thinking of Daryl from Coming to America, where he's like, anything for the kids. Remember that scene? I love that.
They're gonna remake that, by the way. That's a whole different.
I'm not. I'm super fucking conservative about that.
Yeah, same here.
Don't remake perfection.
Oh, not remake sequel, but either way, I'm not.
No, don't touch it.
Yeah,
don't
leave it alone.
Dude, Coming to America is one of the best movies ever. Like,
You
don't need to do Godfather again. You don't need to do Coming to America again. Just certain things.
Here's the one reason why I'm for all this conversation about Black Panther. And I realized it late
because it gives you a chance to go in on all of your least favorite black media people.
No, it's not even that. But that's a perk. Can
I have another beer, guys, please?
One thing about this is that it gives. There's a lot of. I like the idea of using movies, pop culture, literature, all this stuff for analysis. But the sad truth of the matter is, a lot of people aren't reading like the greats or the classics anymore. It's not like you can really have that broad base to talk about things like you used to. It's like you can say, hey, I'm going to randomly bring up Invisible Man in the conversation, and everyone in the room's going to know. You can't.
Can I make a really brief divergent point? I was thinking the other day of Jordan Peterson because I'm racking my brain about this guy and trying to figure him out and deal with him and everything. And I was just thinking and he always with all of this shit of identity politics obscures the individual. And I was like, have you ever read Invisible Man? Literally, the point of that book is I cannot be seen as this unique, distinct individual because of this uniform of blackness that does not allow me to be that in this society. It's the aspiration of that character is actually on some level Peterson-like in the sense of he wants to be seen as an independent agent.
Yeah.
And simply cannot because of how overriding racism is.
Yeah.
It's such a performative contradiction. And Fanon's.
Yeah, it's what Fanon's about. But, I mean, in the form of Invisible Man, in the form of fiction, it's much easier than trying to get someone to digest Fanon's prose. Right. Which is the beauty of using literature to discuss issues. And sadly, we're in a culture where this is the high art.
Right.
With a capital A. This is the literature. This is what people don't talk about novels anymore or whatever. Not really. Unless it's going to be made into a movie.
Right.
Yeah.
No, so you're right. So it's legit. No, you're right. It's absolutely legit to talk about. I agree with you.
Yeah. So what this gives a platform for, this is one of the few things I've seen where you can talk to just about any black person you meet, any white person you meet, any Asian, any Latino.
No, not Latinos. Not so much them.
You can talk to anybody, and they know what you're talking about. So I think it's a rare moment that now this a piece of art that everybody can debate these issues and refer to the same text. Because even some things that were kind of elevated as, oh, this is a message movie, like say like Moonlight or Some or whatever, or Get Out, still relatively few people in the population compared to blockbusters. We don't really saw it, So
I really liked Brief Divergence. I really liked Moonlight as just like, I think it's just like a very nice piece of filmmaking and writing and acting. I don't think it's as, I think it's like a nice play that's a movie.
Yeah.
Get Out is pretty flawless. Like I was really not because I just, whatever. I guess that's just my personality. That the amount of hype and feedback about that movie, I thought when I finally saw it, which was pretty recently, that it would simply just be impossible for it to live up to that expectation set. And I watched it, I was like, that's basically a flawless film.
Yeah.
That's kind of mind-blowing, actually, because I'm not even like the biggest Key and Peele fan, to be honest with you.
Well, that's the thing.
Like,
it's
I like them,
really,
but I'm not like
there's not really
amazed.
much in there that would have indicated to you that one of these guys had that in them.
There's some of that. There was a horror streak in there, but not at that level of like. And dude, Bradley Whitford.
Oh yeah,
that's just,
it's cool.
Terrifying acting right there.
The meta casting, I think they were casting on a meta level because I think using the girl from Girls and the privilege thing with them, and then Bradley Whitford, West Wing. Like West Wing is the epitome of that kind of liberal.
Yeah.
And I had to think that was on purpose too. So
no, that movie's pretty flawless. But let me say this. Okay, so. Well, first of all, why don't you explain just briefly the plot for people who haven't seen it, and then why you are like pro Killmonger, and then I'll tell you my fucking brilliant off-the-chain critique of Killmonger, which I've based entirely off of Twitter threads.
People are upset
articles.
that you haven't seen it, by the way, so you want to keep that short.
Okay.
You know my response is like James Woolsey talking about the CIA disposing governments in other countries. I'm going to talk about it anyways.
Good footsteps.
Yeah. Now,
see the way I clued that into because we're talking about CIA, Africa, Wakanda, Black Panther being CIA Stan movie.
Yeah, and you would appreciate it because I know you know a lot of about the CIA interventions. Your international game is very good, but I feel like a lot of people don't kind of realize what the CIA represents and what it's done.
Right.
And okay, so. The plot of Black Panther, I'm sure most people listening have seen it, and if not, Well,
hopefully not if they're white, you bastards.
You
sucked it. The reason I haven't seen it yet is I'm trying not to suck the joy out of Trevor's experience, okay? I happen to have a lot of black friends. I refuse to suck the joy out of their experience.
They had people, they had armed guards turning away white people at the theater when it was showing.
I ain't seen no melanin, man.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here. Which is totally antithetical to the movie, because as far as I understand, if the message of the movie should be that you guys should be ushering us in.
Oh, yeah. The movie,
saying, we forgive you for all of your wrongs.
Yeah.
Come see our film and enjoy our cuisine.
All lives matter.
All lives.
Yeah, that was basically it. That's basically
Can you soundboard that? All lives matter.
That's basically what
Of course,
it is.
black lives matter. So do white lives. So do Asian lives. We are caring about every single life.
Yeah, and basically, I mean, this is Obama the movie. Like this is. He is Obama, T'Challa. Like,
okay, so T'Challa's the king.
Yeah, T'Challa's the king.
Right.
And kind of like how Obama was always like, I'm not the president of Black America and the president of all America. Like he's like, I'm not the leader of the world. I'm just the leader of Wakanda.
Right.
I'm not the leader of all the black diaspora, whatever. And so, okay, the Wakandans are just sitting in Africa with vibranium, and
which is like a technology that is the most advanced technology in the world.
Yeah,
they're basically 100 years ahead of the rest of us, and they're just chilling. And they are actually, not only are they not intervening in the rest of the world, they're actually
hiding,
pretending that they're like just another sort of like
third
basically
world,
like underdeveloped kind of Yeah, just sort of no particularly geostrategic importance. Country.
Yeah, like there's a land of poor farmers, and they even have like a force field that has an illusion, and they have a whole decoy outer perimeter, like a city, just like an open air marketplace, whatever. Then you go past
Do the
force
Wakandans
field.
get pissed about who has to pretend to be in the open air marketplace? Is that like a competition to not have that role?
No, because this movie does not really care about the world building at all. Like it's basically like 4 sets. It's the smallest super empire I've ever seen.
Because I would be really pissed if I was in Wakanda and I had to be sent out to like, pretend to like. I'd be like, why do I always have to pretend to be a goat herder? I have 7 Maseratis and Nathanium, and I am the one who is pretending to be in an underdeveloped country. Fuck you, Black Panther. You are nothing but Bill Cosby on steroids. This is like Obama the movie.
I think,
Listen, subscribe to Champagne Shark.
I think they do shifts.
Put the graphic back on. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. No, I think they do shifts. They take turns of who has to spend time outside. It's like the Park Slope Food Co-op. You do a couple of hours in the.
I do not want the shift later this month. I do not want to pretend to be the HIV ravaged family again.
Yeah. So they have that, and the world building is pretty boring because everything's either just looks like a third world stereotype or it looks like Dubai. It's just like a cheesy modern development. like it's very like
it looks like they. Okay.
Yeah. It just looks like a developer's wet dream. Like it doesn't look like anything particularly imaginative, you know.
Right.
And
they haven't done anything like futuristic and ecological. They're just sort of like, we have all this advanced technology and sophistication, so let's just throw up a bunch of hotels.
Yeah, exactly. And they put a little African motifs on stuff, like a panther head here and a lion fur. But
that's like my apartment. That's not special.
Yeah. I mean, like there's like 6 sets. Right. One of them looks like an Apple showroom, and that's where the genius sister
looks like an Apple showroom.
Yeah, it looks like an Apple store, and the genius sister does all her inventing there. It's just like an Apple store, and they put like little like kente cloth here and a animal head here, just to kind of remind you, hey, this is African.
I'm going to the genius bar.
Yeah, exactly. and you look at all these different African artists who do like Afrofuturism and stuff, and they do all these weird conceptual things where they imagine like Nigeria on steroids with a Blade Runner thing, and it looks really crazy. And I was hoping this movie would have some of that,
or even like taking like Fela Kuti's temple. Like there's so many things that you could build, like unbelievable. Like like the Afrofuturism movement. I mean, the material was there to do any number of amazing sets.
Yeah, so it's very weird how lazy it was. But the plot is that there's this villain that seems like he's gonna be the main villain, and he's a white guy. He
so far so good.
Yeah, he's going in to plunder resources. So I'm like, I'm all in for this.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. Then it turns out that his partner, the black guy who was his partner, Michael B. Jordan, Killmonger, is actually the real villain. He kills the white guy, delivers the white guy to the Wakandans because this white guy is somebody who the Wakandans have wanted for like decades for his crimes against Wakanda. He's had a long-standing beef with Wakanda. He's always plundering the resources. He killed the family of Wakanda's top general. And this is why I say T'Challa's like Obama. Wakanda's people are always like, hey, are you going to get us justice for this guy Claw? He's done all this stuff to us. Obama's top general is like, hey,
is that on purpose?
He killed my family. He killed my family.
Right.
What are you going to do? And then T'Challa's like, we'll do what we can. You know, you have diplomacy.
Let me be clear. We disagree with what Claw's done.
Yeah,
we don't.
Exactly. It's always about diplomacy. He has the chance to kill Claw, and then one of the female generals is like, hey, the world is watching. You can't do it. And he's like, he's Mr. Respectability all the time.
Oh, okay, I see.
So he doesn't kill him.
So she's like Valley Jarrett.
Yeah, and the
like, you can't do that. It would be very bad for public perception.
Exactly.
And he's like, that's a good point.
They're in like
problem with Claws. He plays zero-sum games.
I mean, his whole thing is always they go low, we go high. That Michelle Obama thing.
He kills the general's family. We don't stoop to that.
Yeah. So they capture him in South Korea, which
capture him in South Korea,
which is neutral ground. And somehow in the next scene, he's being interrogated by the CIA. So he just hands it over to the CIA and lets him get custody.
The king of a futuristic, advanced African kingdom captures a mortal enemy and hands them off to the same people that killed Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah, exactly. But
this is bringing out my inner like.
But
like what the fuck?
But they make it clear that
that's actually that is super offensive. Though.
They made it clear that T'Challa himself would be one of those people who went against Patrice Lumumba, and I'll explain how later. Okay. But
Jesus Christ,
they so he lets the CIA get them, and they're like, "Why are we letting the CIA get them?" He's like, "Oh, don't worry, it'll be fine."
Watch Homeland.
Yeah,
they changed a lot as an organization.
Now, Killmonger Killmonger just comes in.
Yep.
And he know up until this point he's been pretending to be Claw's friend, the mortal enemy of the Wakandans.
Right.
He busts in, just shoots people, knocks everybody out, gets Claw out of there.
Spoiler alerts, I guess.
Yeah.
In the show, but don't say everything. Well, whatever.
Yeah, gets him out.
Grow up.
Okay.
This isn't going to be edited. Just deal with it.
And then he ends up turning. This is a huge spoiler. So
no, wait. Don't even get there. Just say like basically like just without the huge spoiler. Killmonger basically. It's public knowledge that he wants to go take over Wakanda, and then he wants to use the advanced tech to basically like have like a global black revolution.
Okay.
And the controversy is that why is the guy who wants to use the technology to have a global black revolution, why is this the villain? Right?
Yeah. Well, what I will say is this, and this is a minor spoiler. Killmonger ends up delivering to the Wakandans something that they've been begging T'Challa for, that he never wants to do because it's all about respectability. That's how Killmonger ends up winning half of the Wakandans to his side. You know, he's like,
I see.
He's just like, you know, your king won't do this for you. So that's how he gets into Wakanda and doesn't get his head chopped off. And then he reveals that, you know, he has a royal tie to the Wakandan bloodline.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Now,
slow down on the spoilers because I can't have nerds fucking freaking out about this. I can't do it.
See, it's hard because there's no way to talk about the main beef without.
Isn't the main beef though? Right? I'll just dumb it down. It's just that like why is the dude who wants to have like a global black uprising? Why is he the bad guy?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Why is he the bad guy? But the other thing is too. They add a lot of gratuitous mustache twirling.
Now, let me just say, isn't it obvious? Why is the black guy? Why is the bad guy?
Yes,
he's practicing aggrievement politics.
Yeah.
This is Mitt Romney.
They
Killmonger is not going to lead the way forward. You people need job training.
They add some mustache twirling to Killmonger to make him like extra bad. So like, you know.
So they choose to like really make clear by like gratuitous and unnecessary things that like this guy's a real piece of shit, even though it isn't necessary to write him that way. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't have to be written that way. So they do this gratuitous stuff, but there's also some weird things in there that I think, okay, even if he did do these things, I still think they're not so bad. And what I mean by that is this, right? He's killed all these men, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he kills a woman who happens to be a general, and the whole premise of these things is women are as good as men, they're as good warriors as men, they can kick 100 men's asses.
Right.
And you can't just go back and forth. You can't have this kind of you go girl feminism,
right,
and say women are as good as men. This is empowering because it shows women are as good as men. And then when a woman in the middle of a battle, one of the top generals, gets killed by him, now you're trying to be paternalistic and make them a damsel in distress.
Well, but that's that modern shit. That's like the same people who are like, Hillary Clinton's the greatest badass in human history. Oh my God, Bernie Sanders tried to say something at a debate. He's a misogynist.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all that nonsense. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a final pitch. We're going to finish the Black Panther conversation and play a game and watch Alex Jones and take your calls and your IMs. So much more in the post game. So let me just say, though, really quickly, as I say, we are accountable to nobody but you because we're supported through Patreon. We're growing. Things are moving. We have lots of new illicit history content. It's every Sunday, obviously. You can participate in the post-game this way at patreon.com/TMBS, We appreciate it. We're on track. We're going to set our next goal very soon for the number we want to hit for the year anniversary of the Michael Brooks Show. Everybody, the patrons, the people obviously who work here, all of our crew and family and friends and everybody makes this possible. We're on the move. Thank you, Trevor Beaulieu. Check out Champagne Sharks, excellent show. He's going to still be here in the post game. Thank you to Matt Leck.
Go to killmongerwasright.com. I reserved the domain. There are Killmonger Was Right t-shirts off sale there.
I love it. We'll get to this in the post game. Thank you, Matt Leck. Thank you, David Grisham. Thank you, David Slavic. We're going to get to your questions from the Discord, your IMs, and the calls. We'll be back on the post game in a couple minutes. Thanks, everybody.